every year.
There's a total disconnect now between the ruling group and the masses.
I hate psychology.
Clear out.
They're the same worm-like characters.
Analysts.
Fuck you with your stupid argument.
They should not bother us.
Democracy. All of this just works.
Vote for the generations who are coming.
Fully dynamic game engine.
A millennial video essayist.
Always support strength,
Constant craving.
and identity.
I haven't yearned. They are a disease of our time.
Clear them out. You're voting for what your grandfather and father fought for.
I sit and yearn.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Longhouse, the weekly show for the sensible centrist. And today, as has always been our position, I would like to remind everyone listening, both in the audience and at YouTube, that here at The Longhouse, we do indeed love the nation of Israel. Lydic Path, how are you doing?
Yeah, thanks for coming back on again. So we're celebrating Passover here with our dreidels and everything. What are you supposed to do in Passover again? Let me just check.
No, don't say that. We'll get in trouble again.
You spin the chicken or something, or is it some other? Yeah, we've done the pilgrimage.
Is that the one where you absolve yourself of the sins via?
I think so too. Just to inform the audience, even though I said that a certain group does not have power last time, I've been to the Wailing Wall now, and my comments on that is basically they do and also do not have power. It just depends on whatever they want me to say. I'm just going to say it. So that's my official position currently. Please don't take the stream down.
I did try to dispute. I mean, for those of you who are not aware, the previous episode is not on YouTube because Lydic Path, through basically strawmanning other people online, managed to say some words that the YouTube algorithm didn't like. And although I tried to appeal saying that this is out of context, it got denied. So,
I think if you're using...
The channel is now on probation for 90 days, so we have to be good boys, as it were, be suitable for all advertisers, and we'll see if we can get back into the good graces of Susan. Is Susan still?
No, I think it's in Pajit now.
It's an Indian man. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I don't remember Pajit names very well, but like anything else, they put Pajits in charge, and Pajits are Israel's strongest soldiers, as usual. I mean, I don't know the connection here
today that I couldn't quite decipher of like an Indian lion with like Israel as its cub going after Palestine or something.
Yeah. Yeah, this is something I frequently see, like with these kind of Indian Facebook groups that they don't touch Israel. It's like Israel is the big lion, and then no, India is the big lion, and Israel is a small cub underneath there. So it's quite interesting. I think I've asked about this before on Twitter, like what exactly is the origin of the affinity between India and Israel. It's a pretty interesting dynamic. As far as I got is that the closest thing India gets to a principled policy is that anything that harms Pakistan is good for them. I mean, they would like if like bombing themselves would hurt Pakistan in some way, that would just be their number one priority. So yeah, they don't like the Muslims. And
if we nuke ourselves when the wind is right, they'll have the fallout. Yeah.
But I mean, I can't really fault them for having these kind of weird positions on Israel, because that seems to be like, it doesn't matter where you are in the world. Everybody has some opinion about the Israel-Palestine stuff, and it's almost 100% of the time completely based on some kind of idealism. Like, it's very hard to justify giving a shit about it as a sort of realpolitik thing. As you just look at, okay, what is in my country's best interest, and okay, so what's in the Middle East now? Is there any resources we need there? No. Is this like any kind of geostrategic thing for us? but either because of some involvement politically, or because they just they're getting that stuff on the news all the time. They have some opinion about how this should be run. So it's very interesting in that way. We'd be interesting maybe to talk to some Pajit who could explain that to me. We're sure we have some watching the show. So if you're a Pajit,
Maybe.
please explain the Israel India relation and make us smarter.
Make us understand. So this week we have I guess hodgepodge of news. Sometimes things pile up, and sometimes things have been in our radar for a while, but we wanted to sort of collect enough material on it. And one of those things is going to be say local, but it's quite national news in Norway. About the youth group of the Communist Party, who calls themselves the Reds. They recently had a sort of shake-up in membership. Some call it a coup, others call it, a free and fair election, etc. And the people who are now in charge of that part of the party have a bit of a history. Not sure if you want to say anything else.
I mean, they aren't in charge anymore. I think the leaders in the main party had to kick them out.
Oh,
that
okay,
was the end of it.
That was the end of
it. The coup was cut short. I mean, it wasn't a coup as much as a sort of organized minority, if you will, inside of the youth party of Arab Marxists that are sort of more kind of orthodox Marxists that had decided that they were going to take over the youth wing of that party.
Yes.
And I mean, we call them the Communist Party.
I suppose then, to use populist delusion terms, I mean, they did win on being the organized minority, but it turns out that, the organized minority is still in charge in the parent party and they have more power. So
yeah, the establishment wins again, usually. Well, I guess the first pro tip is that if you are a pro running actual coups, like, military coups and like doing military intervention, military revolutions, you should probably not start talking about it before you're actually in a position to do so, or something to that effect. I mean, it's if you think that you can argue people into the position that a military coup is necessary, you don't need the military coup.
Right.
That should be kind of an obvious position.
It should be kind of given.
You can sit in a debate and make the argument that we should, because of some injustice, it would be justified now to send in some kind of paramilitary group and change the government. Then you don't really need it to begin with. So you probably just want to be a little bit hush-hush about that, but I assume there was some kind of inexperience or that they thought they wouldn't be noticed.
Certainly. All right. So what you've got for me first here on the docket is the talk about them, the leader being interviewed by state media.
Yeah, I thought that was a nice article because it comes from more of this kind of center-right condemning perspective, right? But it does highlight the more controversial bits of what this is. I tried to find the kind of state media actual interviews, but there was so much. I mean, the website is not that friendly for indexing and trying to look up exactly what you want. So I didn't get.
Before we get going here, there's a chat from Skuro who asks, I posted a community note when the video went down that, you can watch our stuff on other platforms, the Bird app. We also back up all of our episodes on Odyssey, etc. And I said as a joke that I had to take an HR course, but that's not too far off the mark because I had to fill out like a questionnaire on YouTube about their policy thing. It was like a 2-minute, thing, but yeah, it's not too far from the truth. Very gay. Anyway, go ahead, Letting Path.
I think I lost my train of thought there.
Sorry.
No, this is from a kind of center-right perspective, this author, and we talked about Nettavisen before. It was fair to label them probably as further right than I think most papers. I think this is probably, as far as like the mainstream newspapers in Norway, like the furthest in terms of this, this kind of right, liberal conservative, as we call it in Europe. Like that particular brand of commentary, probably because they do a lot of economics and finance related stuff. So that goes with the package.
Yeah.
But here he does talk about some of the more controversial things that have actually happened. So there's so many articles that have been done on this now. But just to reiterate some of the facts, I mean, the parties will usually have like a nationwide meeting once, I don't know if it's once per year or once every 4 years, where they decide who is going to be the new leadership and who's going to be this and that. And, some people get promoted, some people get kicked down. And this, inside of the red wing, the wing of the Red Party, because, I mean, you call them the Communist Party, but this is a part of the, I guess, the controversy, because they used to be, there still is a party in Norway of boomer
That's
tankies
true.
that's called like the Norwegian Communist
Party. Yeah.
And creating the party that's called the Red, they tried to kind of remove that labeling a little bit. They didn't want to have that hard tanky edge, and like in the previous years, they've actually had a lot of success by running on this kind of more leftist populist platform. We've covered the party leader Bjørnar Moxnes, who was removed as party leader because of
Practicing what he preached.
he was stealing shades from some airport store. It's like he's basically doing petty thievery, and for that reason he was removed. But he was a very competent party leader in terms of just selling this kind of populist stuff. It works very well because you have a party of more radical elements.
He was good looking as well.
He was a good-looking, straight,
all in all, he did really
male.
well because he was easy on the eyes. He was able to sort of, hold a conversation without seeming like a madman, and he could sell a lot of the socialist stuff without it sounding extreme.
And he could sell it to guys like us. I mean, not as radical as
Yeah.
we are, but say in our demographic, like you reached out to disenfranchised white men and convinced them that it's the capitalism that's the problem, or that it's wealth transfer or something that's like the biggest issue we face. He was very successful, but because of the petty theft, he had to go, and he was replaced by some like redhead with problem glasses. So I thought, from this point, it's just going to be downhill from there, and it has been.
Yeah.
Of course, but now they're having this problem with Arabic immigrants, or at least Arab first or second generation immigrants, actually Marxoids that are coming into the youth wing of the party.
Yeah, like Palestinian Marxoids.
Yeah, it does work with that. I mean, we're getting into the foreign policy bit later, but you could just start reading off the article and people will get the idea of what we're talking about.
I can do that. So this has, of course, as per usual, been ran through the Google machine, so I'll be trying to do some translating on the fly because it doesn't always go perfectly. So what he's referring to here is NRK, which is state media. It's basically BBC, has a cozy chat with a terrorist supporter. So this is a commentary article or an opinion piece. Mass murderers are all right people as long as they come from the left. This comment expresses the writer's opinions. Imagine the following. A Norwegian youth party has a new leader who proudly declares that she has a deputy leader who, quote, loves Mustache Man. What would happen?
The
media, especially.
What if the roles were reversed, guys?
Yeah, imagine if the roles were reversed.
Have you heard this one before?
We're one sentence in.
This is the center right classics. Like we have to roll these out.
Let's go. The greatest hits. The media, especially NRK, and the humor program, Nytt, which is like the UK has something like it as well, where it's like at the end of the week there's like a funny quiz show about like events and news that happened that week. I don't remember what it's called. Would have gone berserk. But then the newly elected reader of Red Youth proudly and happily says that her deputy, quote, loves Lenin. And then NRK, BBC, invites her for a cozy chat at the evening news. Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov, nicknamed Lenin, was no liberation hero. He was a violent coup plotter and a mass murderer. It was not Lenin's Bolsheviks who freed Russia from imperial power under the last Tsar Nicholas II. Russia had had its own democratic revolution in February 1917, but the democracy was weak and unstable. So it was easy for Lenin and his co-conspirators to seize power in a violent coup in November of that year, destroying the budding democracy. Again, organized minority and disorganized majority. Lenin and the Bolsheviks by no means had the majority of the people behind them. They had to be forced to accept the new communist one-party rule through violence and murder. Lenin and his henchmen killed at least 1 million of their political and religious opponents, but were also responsible for the murder of hundreds of thousands of Cossacks and others who tried to rebel against the coup plotters. In addition, Lenin is also responsible for millions of people who died in famines or in the political prison camps created by the Bolsheviks. Lenin started the mass murders. Stalin continued them. Many may think that Lenin was the, quote, good dictator, while his successor, Stalin, was the brutal butcher. The truth is that Stalin simply took over a system that Lenin had established, where Lenin personally ordered the killing of the class enemies. Alexander Nikolaevich Yakovlev, who was the architect for perestroika and glasnost during the Soviet Union's final leader Gorbachev, writes about Lenin and Stalin. Quote, "The truth is that Stalin's punitive expeditions did not introduce anything new that was not already there under Lenin. Executions, the taking of hostages, concentration camps, and all the rest." Historian Robert Gellety concludes, to put it this way, Stalin initiated very little that Lenin had not already introduced or intended. I'm going to need a history check on all four from someone in the chat on all this. I'm not too big on the Soviet Union, to be honest. Anything after World War I is a bit of a black hole for me.
I'll take his word for it on this article. He does sound like he's read up on it, at least in some
Probably,
degree.
yeah. The Reds have a big problem. Their tribute to Lenin in Red Youth is a big problem for the Mother Party. The leader, Marie Sneve Martinussen, who is the woman that you were referring to, says that socialism must be democratic. She rejects that it's relevant to allow authoritarian Leninist forces in the party. But they are allowed. They have just been elected to the Youth Party's leadership. Leader of Red Youth, Amrit Kaur, now sits on the working committee in the Mother Party of Red. If Martinussen means something by what she says, then she must settle with the Youth Party and demand a new leadership from people who do not pay tribute to Lenin. Or she has to get rid of the entire Red Youth as their youth party. Because that's a move as well. Like the Mother Party or the parent party basically decides what the official youth party is, and in theory anyone could create a candidate for a youth party, but that's usually not how it shakes out, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I read somewhere that the former leadership, like after they had done this national meeting and they installed these kind of like brown Leninists, they like the original youth party broke off to have their other to create another sort of more populist version of that party. And I don't know if they've just brought those people back in again, or if they expelled the Marxoids and then they put someone else in. But that's what happened, apparently.
Yeah. Let's see here. Not only the new deputy leader in Reds who loves Lenin should be a very big problem for the Reds. So, should the newly elected leader Amit Kaur, who will not distance himself from the terrorist movement Hamas, nor define Hamas as a terrorist organization. While praising the anti-democratic Islamist Hamas movement, she will not defend democracy in Europe. Kaur says no to all armed support to Ukraine, which is fighting for its life to preserve its democratically governed country against the imperialist Russian aggression. We're getting into some... I mean, the cartwheels everyone have to do to keep their jobs here.
Well, I mean, it's a standard. It will be the standard kind of center-right stuff.
I know,
like,
it's just giving me a little bit of cognitive dissonance is all. Martinussen, who... okay, sorry, he's addressing her directly. Martinussen, how can Reds have a member in the working committee who do so clearly not want to support the fight for democracy in Europe, and who does not want to distance himself from the terror? NRK brings out the cozy vote. The Reds have a problem, but so does NRK. They're in the farm. Let me just check. It's the saying. In that area, we don't have any problem describing easily recognizable people as neo-Nazis, of course, under the guise of it just being quote-unquote humor. But when you get a new leader in the Red Youth who is happy that her deputy, quote, loves Lenin, a new leader who supports Hamas but not Ukraine, well, then you bring out the comfort vote and invite that person as a Saturday guest on the evening news. And that without any proper confrontations about the new leadership's support for historical mass murderers, living terrorists, and lack of support for the fight for democracy in Europe. There's a difference between mass murderers. It is not the first time that NRK has had problems with mass murderers on the left. Has no problems, I suppose. Well, no, it's not the first time that NRK is in hot water with mass murderers on the left. While Mustache Man, the mid-century Germans, and neo-Nazis always get their passports signed in the state channel, and that's a good thing, the same does not happen to the world's greatest mass murderer. Communist China's first dictator, Mao Zedong, was responsible for the deaths of over 40 million people during the Great Leap Forward, and a further 1 to 2 million deaths during the so-called Cultural Revolution. I've had a thought for a little while, Ludwig Path, that, the center-right always likes bringing up, but what about Mao, right? But every time when I hear about China doing anything in history, like 50 million people die anyway.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's that's just how China.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
I do think it was sort of
China.
Exceptionally bad, probably with the commies. I get that impression that they overdid it, but it seems like the same with Palestinians. Also, they just die. It doesn't matter what you're doing. You turn left or you turn right, they just die anyway. But yeah. Of course, I'm not going to get into communist apologetics. I mean, he does go on a bit of a triad.
That specific argument just doesn't jolt me as much anymore as everything. Not that it matters for this conversation anyway.
No, I think we could maybe jump over to the other article, because he does go into a bit of historical triad here. That's not so fun to listen to, but there's you're almost done anyway, but there's the Aftenposten article about the second in command there, the deputy that she's talking about.
Is basically just going, but what if the situation were reversed? And you want to have the interview.
No, it's not the interview, but this was about the woman who was the leader, right? But this guy was the guy who was brought in as a second leader, who was also a part of this Marxist platform, right? So you get the full kind of rogues gallery of the new guard of the Red Youth in Norway, and what they look like. So I mean, this guy I also found on Twitter, right? It was pretty interesting. He does get into spats with a lot of other Norwegian accounts, and I mean, just so there's no misunderstanding.
Castro here, I feel.
Yeah. There's no misunderstandings. He seems to be 100% behind everything that he says about armed revolutions and this kind of stuff, and just genuinely support it, and it interacts with some of the communist apologetics accounts that I've subscribed to as well. But yeah, you could read this one.
Curious Youth or Revolutionary Communist. The Red Youth's new deputy leader, Ahmed al-Saidi, is now deleting things he has posted online. Quote, "I regret that I did not take my new position so seriously right away." On Tuesday this week, in the political quarter on NRK, he was referred to by the newly elected leader of Red Youth, Ahmed Kaur, to the whole of Norway as, quote, "an Iraqi who loves Lenin." Until recently, he has also had a profile picture on Twitter/X where he was standing with a machine gun in his hands. 22-year-old Ahmed al-Saidi lives in Hønefoss and is a law student by day. He says he's not, quote, "so happy to set limits on what I can say or post."
So
I don't.
Do they have the picture there?
Sorry.
I mean, the picture where he's standing in the with the rag and the machine gun.
I've seen it elsewhere. I can find it in another article. If you just give me a moment.
Yeah, it's not necessary, but I think it's just funny. I posted about it on X there. I mean, here it's been censored, right? So that wasn't him, but I talk about landlording sometimes, and you get applicants that are Middle Eastern in backgrounds, and they all just send in an application to live in an apartment, right? And I just Google their name, and you get their Facebook profile up, and they'll stand there aiming an AK-47 at the at the camera or something, and it's they don't hear back usually, and they probably wonder why.
Yeah. All right. "I don't bend easily. I am not in politics to please others," he says. Coup allegations, a secret radical youth wing that does not rule out violence, computer hacking, and a deputy who has a profile picture of him holding a Kalashnikov rifle. The changes of power in Red Youth has received a lot of attention after the national meeting last weekend. Everyone in the new leadership troika denies having anything to do with the communist unit, which allegedly operated internally in Red Youth for 3 years prior to this weekend's quote-unquote coup. That includes al-Saidi. Nor does he want to agree that this was a coup. Fearing more hardened communism. How can it be a coup when so many people voted for it? It was an overwhelming... Yes, it's just democracy, Luddick. It was an overwhelming majority. Fortunately, only a minority believe in it, says the Red Youth's new deputy chairman to the paper. The deposed leader of Red Youth, Liv Miller-Smith-Sivertsen, and the rest of those who lost believe that Red Youth's party now has in reality been couped. Communist Unity states in its platform that it will fight for revolution by peaceful means, quote, as long as possible, and it asks its comrades to, quote, be prepared to use the necessary means to protect our movement should it become necessary. This is like reading... I remember when we watched, or we talked about the documentary recently where they talked with a lot of the active club guys. The funny thing is that I know we just read an article where it's like, oh, imagine if the situation were reversed, but this is the kind of stuff they're writing, right? Online.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the common fear among many after the national meeting is that the change of power will eventually turn the modern Reds into a more hardened, pure communist party. The leader of Red, Maurice Nevermatizzen, that's her, went on Facebook on Wednesday to carry out some firefighting. The Red stands crystal clear for a democratic socialism, which must be rooted in the population and through free and fair elections. If anyone is sounding the alarm, it's us. We have prepared this in several rounds. I'm just checking his. We have stated this multiple times. It is undisputably established in our party program and policy, and there's no reason to doubt this, he says. al-Saidi says he's now primarily concentrating on living up to the great trust that he has received from the Red Youth's national meeting and, quote, as a member of Red Youth, it is in the cards that I would like the parent party to be more radical, but this is something that lies in the first instance with their National Assembly. Otherwise, I look forward to a good collaboration between us, he says. In that sense, he's not wrong. I mean, every youth party is more radical than their parent. That's just how it goes.
Yeah, of course, it gets a little bit spookier with people like this because if he's like actually training to become a lawyer, then his grades are obviously not shit. He's sort of competent enough to get into law school, and he's in like Iraq. You know, he knows how to shoot guns basically, and it's then involved in politics. So you're talking about a much more motivated, sophisticated individual than some kind of like overweight woman who posts about social, what do you call, like mental illnesses on TikTok or something.
Sure, yeah.
Which is what you expect from these kind of youth parties. So this is a bit more
Gibbs and
a bit more teeth
social
to this thing.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of people, I think, reacted, because it's not just, you know, communist in the sense that they have radical opinions. It's that they seem like the kind of people who are willing to back it up, right? I think that's what's sort of alarming a lot of people. Don't believe in revolution. The new deputy chairman has previously said that the photo of him with the Kalashnikov was taken on a holiday trip to Iraq. We knew the chief of the police station, so I was allowed to shoot, al-Saidi told the paper. He has now changed his profile picture. I regret that I did not take the position that seriously right away. I have to delete things that have been taken out of context, he says. Do you see physical violence as a legitimate political tool? No. I distance myself from the use of violence and have no need for violence. I'm studying law and have no affiliation with anything. I have no need to use violence, says al-Saidi. Are you working towards a communist revolution? Revolution can be so many things. If our party gets 50% support in the general election in 2025, it will be a revolution in how we conduct our politics, he says. It's a bit of a Weasley answer, but expected. But the deputy chairman says he has no faith in revolution in Europe. Let me check what he says. Things are too good here. There aren't many who struggle. What we have seen historically is that revolution happens where people are having a hard time, he says. Curious Youth, not a Leninist. Red Youth's new leader, Amit Kaur, has previously made it clear to another paper that she stands far from the parent party Red on a number of issues. She's more radical and will not call Hamas a terrorist organization. Same applies to al-Saidi. We are concerned with, we concern ourselves with being the solution. Without a solution, one can be condemned forever, but nothing happens. We are concerned with the material conditions on the ground and that apartheid Israel should not be allowed to continue as they have done since 1948, he says. Al-Saidi adds that he relates to the UN and Norway's list of terrorist organizations. An Islamist group that has fought against Israel, that is my perception of Hamas, he says. He's not too fond of Carr's description of him as a Leninist. The Lenin statement is inflated. I'm a curious youth, not a Leninist. But I've read up on key figures in the movement and think they come up with a lot of good points. And a lot that is also objectionable, he says. And that's it.
So, I mean, I looked at his Twitter. A lot of it is sort of complaining about how little actual Marx the people in Red Youth ever read. Like, I mean, yeah, I assume that he came into that party and expected that they would be serious or something. It shouldn't be a shock that like these kind of Western mentally ill Marxists haven't actually read any of the things. They just watch Vosh or some BreadTube videos on YouTube or something and want Gibbs. So, I mean, I have some more commentary on this in general, but I wanted to sort of plug it in with something else that's been going on in the Twitter sphere, which is, I mean, it's been going on for weeks now, but it's sort of the right-wing femoid revolt, or the sort of this femoid question. To be more succinct, you have female figures in the right wing, like say like Alex Kashuta, or yeah, you can find my tweet. But there's been, say, like Alex Kashuta has been active with this. Lauren Southern has come in, some other people, and the chorus is then basically that the women are not comfortable in the right wing. They're sort of complaining about there's too much male harassment in the right wing in general, and that because it's this is an escalating problem, and because it's not getting any better, they want to become more centrist or just kind of leave right wing altogether. And like the responses like you get from people in our spheres is like, okay, what are you talking about? Because this is like, say someone like Dave the Distributist, who is active with basket weavers or these kind of things, where they're meeting IRL and they're doing conferences and they're doing banquets and meetups and various things. And like a lot of the IRL stuff has been quite civil and very functional. So when you start getting this stuff, and like, there's been a lot of work as well in the DR to try to filter out the sort of low quality garbage and keep some of the higher quality stuff. And then you get this stuff thrown at you and you don't really understand it. And that's been the response, either that they're sort of perplexed that this is coming up, or that they just say we have to just ignore females. So just, if we succeed, then they will come along. That's been the response, and that's quite understandable. But like when it comes to women, I think it's quite usually a mistake to take them at their word, as you say, or take the stuff they say at face value, and that the stuff they're complaining about is the stuff they're actually upset about. So this is this. I mean, here's her tweet, and she is talking about red pill influencers, and it sort of struck me when I was watching her video. And there's a lot of like counter jihad talking points that are coming up here, and she talks about the popularity of more of this Islamist rhetoric in the red pill sphere that are currently running around. If you're in any doubt, I mean, we reviewed some of Andrew Tate's tweets on last week's stream.
Yeah,
but I mean, for us who are millennials, and you have the people who are the Gen Xers, who sort of compose a lot of the online dissident right, the dialogue is very different from what's going on in, say, the younger sphere. And these things seems to be almost kind of disconnected. So yeah, they're making, you have this James Kirkpatrick here who's making the case that that Laura Southern is actually being abused by the system, right? I mean, you could see her videos about this, that she's had travel bans and her family has been broken up and so on, but she's still become more centrist because the center, how the left or whatever, have power, so women gravitate towards power, and it's a kind of understandable take. But I mean, my take is basically that if you look at the younger guard of the people who are in the right wing, I think the women are actually sort of correct. And I don't mean then millennials, Gen X, dissident right posters who are in this kind of more intellectual sphere. I'm talking about then guys like Andrew Tate. We talked about Fresh and Fit, Nick Fuentes and the Groyper movement, and Sneeko. Like, this is what the young people are watching en masse. And I mean, if you're sitting here watching us, then yeah, congratulations. But like en masse, that's what's catching up. It's this sort of I don't know what you did, like this kind of resentment fueled stuff where I made the joke that if like you take Nick Fuentes out of the Groyper movement, then they will have an average IQ of about 75. Because that's sort of what it seems like. You have like a few smart people and then just like these total resourceless morons that are just flocking around him, and they're jumping on a lot of these. I mean, I wouldn't even call it proto-Islamist talking points. It is just Islamist talking points, whether it's like Andrew Tate or Sneeko or these other influencers. There are political conversions going on now to Islam, and they're going very much into this rhetoric, and it's very sort of mass psychology based. So I understand, like from the women's perspective, that they're encountering this kind of stuff online, and they're getting sort of the ick, so to say, of not only that they don't like the implications of it, but that it's low status, right? And this is also the problem, is that we can't really escape this kind of low status brand. Even though there are like new people coming into the right wing, it's getting bigger. It still remains just incredibly low status because, I mean, say things like Islam, for example. Islam is just perpetually the low status. It doesn't matter, I think, where you are in the world. I don't remember who made this point, but whether it was Richard Harnania or something. But like, Islam is basically dysgenic in its very design, where they would have this kind of, what do you call it? The sort of infidel. They have this kind of tax. That's a part of the Sharia thing. If you're not Muslim, then you have to pay a certain amount of tax if you live in Islamic areas.
Yeah.
But this always ends up having this kind of dysgenic effect where the people who can't afford it, like the people who are not making enough money on their own to pay this tax, they have to convert and become Muslims. And the people who aren't Muslim and they're making enough money to pay this tax, they're not converting. So it has like this perpetual process of always recruiting the weakest and dumbest people in society. Jizya, Nordanon says.
Yeah.
It checks out. That's one effect. I mean, you have like the rampant sort of in-group, the sort of extreme kind of in-group stuff, inbreeding, especially in the Muslim countries where they have the arranged marriages where they're always marrying into the cousins. They're having a bunch of kids, they're marrying the cousins. So there's also that kind of inbreeding element to it. So they just remain basically a kind of mass of people that are perpetually stuck in this kind of like low IQ, low status position. It doesn't really matter where they are in society. Even in like Muslim society, it seems like the people who are in the elite seem more secular, at least in the way they live their lives, than the people who are actually Muslims. But again, it's a sort of it will of course repel these females typically. And what I said on Twitter is that what I think Lauren Southern is reacting to here, it's not really the misogyny of the right wing, but it's the browning of the right wing. People, they've talked about this statement, the browning of America, like Ben Shapiro doesn't care about the browning of the America, and the great replacement type rhetoric, where the idea has been, especially for people on the right wing, that, okay, you have mass immigration and the newcomers have higher birth rates than the native populations. And if that continues perpetually, then the native populations become replaced by the immigrant populations, and the way that this is imagined to happen is that it's the normies, right? The normies who are apolitical and don't understand what's going on, that the normies are gradually going to be replaced by immigrants. But I mean, I think what we're seeing instead is really that it's the fringes that are being replaced. It's like whether it's like the right wing or the left wing, as you're seeing with the Norwegian Red Party, that there are
the extremes are being swapped out.
The extremes seems to be swapped out to a much larger degree. If you're looking at the involvement of either Islamic or demagogues or demagogues that are brown in the right wing, for example, it's just crazy. I've talked about this before as to like why I hate anti-woke influencers in particular, where I try to just do polls and run up like how many of these influencers now that are active and that have large quote-unquote market shares within the right-wing space are just straight up first generation, second generation immigrants, or they don't live in the West at all. Like I talked about, say, like Ian Miles Chong, for example, who's like this guy, and where does he live? Malaysia or something
like that.
I mean, he's like one of the big accounts
Yeah.
in the right wing, who's just posting about transgenders and this kind of stuff, and he doesn't live here. He doesn't even live in the West, but he's one of the like biggest accounts here. Like, I mean, Radio Genoa was recently suspended on Twitter, which is another account of some Cambodian man who's moved to France, and he posts about Italian immigration issues, right? So there are like these kind of sneaky accounts that are brown people that are just posting this kind of demoralization porn continuously, like live leak clips of black people punching white people or stuff like that. Or you have like these other sort of the anti-woke influencers that are like the fresh and fit stuff, or the podcast circuits, right? With the people who come on Joe Rogan, the amount of brown people who show up there. Whereas like if you're looking at more of the stock of the people who are in these kind of center right liberals, they seem to remain pretty white, weirdly enough, where it's like it's sort of the Marxoids and the right wingers that are being replaced by the browns. And the problem is that this.
Well, if you want another
process,
extreme, I mean, we already mentioned it, but you get all the Indians at the top of like the companies.
That's
well.
Also a
it's
sort
truly
of
in the extremes, right?
yeah, but I mean, the problem that I see with this replacement stuff is that it changes things from just being kind of cute and innocuous to being dangerous and pernicious. Like you say that you go from, you have the Red Party that are these, white youths, you could say, who live in Scandinavia, and there's discontent with the system. Like, say, the young idealists, and maybe they haven't read that much, but they feel like society's unfair
something
young
wrong.
mothers or something, or it's unfair that people have so much money, or it's like this.
They read one passage of Marx one time at
that's cute. That's kind of like they're in a phase now, and they need to act out their political activism, and then maybe in time they'll come around to being more moderate. And that's kind of the thought process here, is that over time they'll smooth out a bit, they'll establish families, and they'll become centrist or something, maybe center left. But when you start replacing them then with immigrants,
they'll marry some incel guy who's now drifting towards the center right.
Yes, exactly. Like, these things will shake itself out in balanced in the end. But now it's not like that anymore, and you're seeing it with the like, if they're being replaced now with these kind of like brown Marxoids who are coming from war zones, who are like studying law and working around the clock, figuring out how to do revolutions, all of a sudden, this is not cute anymore. It's kind of an actual kind of dangerous situation, and it ends up just kind of reinforcing the, especially like these center-right people are just going to look like they were right the whole time. Like, even these kind of like dumb comments they have where they talk about Mao and stuff. I mean, it's especially with the replacement thing, it kind of becomes true. And on the right wing, I think it's I wouldn't say it's worse, but it's like, I think it's equally bad. Where let's say like with the red pill was fair, if it is mostly kind of lonely white guys, white nerds who want to get laid, then that's cute. That's something that they're trying to find a way, trying to work around their autism to find a wife, and they'll do that. They'll mellow out a bit, and this will stop. But now you're seeing like a larger amount of this of this red pill space is brown men, And I mean, going back, we had this stream where we were talking about the Progress Party, Simon Vettler, or whatever his name is, who was running an article about this standard manosphere talking point that there's too many single men, right?
Yeah.
And this is becoming a social problem. This is what Jordan Peterson has talked about. But I read a response article from a researcher who was much more read up on Norwegian demographics, and he said that, like, you know, one of the biggest reasons why you're seeing an overrepresentation of single men in the statistics is really because of immigrants, and that there's a lot of refugees and immigrant men who are just perpetually single. It's when you look at the ethnically Norwegian population, it's actually a lot smaller.
So if you control for ethnicity, the problem isn't as big.
But this creates a very kind of sinister picture, because you're seeing these Pajeets, like the videos of all these sort of lonely Pajeets who are complaining about being single. So these are people who probably have just lived in these kind of various shithole countries, and they've, through the grapevine, they've heard about the West and the decadence and these, like, all these promiscuous women or something, and they go to Scandinavia and they hope that they can get some pussy from like 5'11" Heidi or something. But it's not happening, right? They'd sort of imagine that it would be easy for them to find a wife, to find women or something, but they are just kind of left out of it completely, and they're not able to establish themselves in any meaningful sense. So they grow resentful and they start building up this kind of red pill coalition, in a sense. And this is the picture that's created in my mind recently, and I think it's accurate. It's something that I've sort of overlooked a bit, how much of the red pill stuff is just really kind of like immigrants in the West who are resentful that they can't get a hold of Western women. So now it's not
this just pockets basically of people. I mean, it's not big enough to be a huge problem in any single country in that regard, right?
No, it's not
just across Europe / the West in general. Then
a critical mass, but it changes the image of what I think the right wing is from.
Certainly,
say, okay, this is like nerds, for example, who have an issue with modern gender dynamics, who are trying to find ways around it, to immigrant populations who just generally are resentful of white women, period. Like that's what it sort of becomes. There's a completely different angle to what this looks like. The same thing is like true with, say, people who are regime skeptics, right? It's turning from people who live inside of the countries who are unhappy with the way regime is run, to basically foreign agents who are just straight up just like mouthpieces for foreign hostile regimes to sit and push their talking points in through this resentment. And I mean, it really is something different. It's very easy to sort of think that you're sort of an independent and that you can balance viewpoints, but I think it's much more likely that you end up just being a useful idiot being in the right wing. Unfortunately, that's just what I'm seeing, and I'm looking at it currently. The amount of people who I think just end up being mouthpieces for some other type of foreign agenda it's kind of frighteningly large, actually. So yeah, I guess that's my spiel on that. I don't know if you have any thoughts.
Well, I'm going to have to pay some more attention to that stuff. But what you're saying largely rings true. I mean, there has been... I think it's just become a lot more... Maybe it's because you're retweeting it. But it's something that happened, I think, after Musk took over, when he sort of leveled the playing field a bit more on Twitter, is that it's become a lot more obvious what is happening. Like the rate of coal has increased, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, the quality assurance is not there anymore, right?
Yeah.
I mean, typically you'd have some standard enforced, and I mean, people didn't like that, and it was very unfair, I think, in many ways. But now it's just kind of the amount of bots and the amount of coal that's being posted there, and I mean, at least under Dorsey or something, you could get a little bit more thoughtful right-wing content, but now it's just like wall-to-wall coal all the time. So I mean, it is it is quite concerning.
Yes, and it's sort of... I keep thinking that when someone like AA says that the DR is dead, he might not be thinking about this, but I don't think there's any way to bounce back from this, right? It's just going to get flooded with low quality stuff, and we're just going to have to sort of build something else on the other side, or just stop whatever we're doing, right? And move on to alternatives.
Yeah, we can maintain, we can sort of just keep doing what we're doing, but there's so much noise that I feel just crowds out the reasonable talking points, and there's so many influencers that are just becoming like just mouthpieces for foreign actors, in a sense. So it's not a good look, to be honest. You have to think about something else. But I think we've spent maybe enough time on that, didn't you? I think you had some other article you wanted to look at as well.
We'll, do you want to do... Well, hang on. Let's do this one first, because it's sort of... I know it's anecdotal, so to speak, but it kind of illustrates your point. Let me just share my screen here.
I'm an Andrew Tate
Hopefully
fan,
you
so
can hear
jobs are
this.
for losers.
So what's your name?
Catchup.
Where are you from?
Punjab, India.
What brought you to Canada?
So I'm here for the studying and mostly for the PR. Like that's every international student's dream.
So with the job that you're looking for, have you already had any previous experience on that?
No, I don't have any experience on any job. Like right now, I'm working at a gas station. It's helping me a lot to understand some business tactics, but not that much.
So in terms of future jobs that you would like to do after you graduate, what are you looking for?
I'm an Andrew Tate fan, so jobs are for losers.
Pardon?
Andrew Tate.
Andrew Tate.
Yeah, the Romanian guy. The bald guy.
Tell me why you want to be like Andrew Tate.
He says to escape the matrix. Matrix is like a bubble made by the government. Like just to be in there, to be slaves, they give you money to work for themselves 9 to 5. That's it. I want to get rich. I'm an Andrew Tate.
So that's it. He rocks up to your country with no interest in contributing anything, right? He's just here for the PR. And when pressed, he says that, it's all bullshit anyway because it's the Matrix. Like, and then he delivers like the most trite, yeah, man, it's just, the 9 to 5. And I'm all for sort of breaking some of the boomerisms on work-life balance. But this is like the gay sort of free your mind, old school lefty take, which is baked in with this weird Andrew Tateism.
Well, I think freeing your mind at this point just means you jump off the mainstream narratives, and then you just go into the sewer.
You go into some other pigeonhole
of the right wing, essentially, which is either just these kind of Muslim grifters or the Russian grifters. That's what it seems to be right now. The alternatives that you have.
Hello, sir. Yes, you could do the unmute now, please, sir. Do you guys know about Paul Sagan? He's an old guard Norwegian Marxist, but his news site reports on very important topics that the mainstream media won't cover. Yes, and we have talked about him in the past, and we will reference him from time to time. But I mean, I don't think we're going to do like a, biopic or anything on it.
Well, yeah, I do. I mean, it is interesting to go in and read, but I have so many of the tankies on my timeline. So I mean, I sort of get the point. It's
he's part of my sort of news rotation. Yeah. And it's nice because he's refreshing in that sense. All right. Let's go in. Well, no, we have to do this first. I'm sorry. While we're just talking about this, I mean, it's too good to. So this video here was circulating. This is posted by one guy called GAB Remilio. And he says Indians. Well, maybe I can't say this. Let's just watch this video in the background while I narrate it. This guy filmed himself sort of talking about how he can save money, but essentially all he's doing is going to the local campus and getting money from the food bank. But it turns out that, this guy does actually work for, where is it? Maybe I lost it. One moment. This post has been locked down. Okay, well, it was found out that he works for some tech company and should theoretically make like 100,000 Canadian a year, right? If the average salaries are anything to go by. And he ended up getting fired because of this. And that this guy here, Rukpa Kunli, something, who is a great poster and a recommended follow. He's very funny. Was posting about this as well, to the point where he says posts about Indian students stealing from food banks by people like Slatism and I apparently upset some very vindictive Indian users for being, quote, anti-Indian. They are so upset that they are coordinating in chats like Indian cyber defenders on Telegram for mass reporting and doxing. And they have this Pepe here with some very cool Hugo Boss attire in front of an Indian flag, where they fight the good fight. So he's saying here, listen, everyone, this Pagliacci has crossed the limit now. She's got an Indian fire just because he took some food from a food bank during his college days. And how about she needs to feel the pain? They have to dox them. They have like scripts that trawls the web, like on usernames to try to find people across platforms to get them reported. Some highlights from other posts and accounts in these Indian dox rings, including mass reporting of AI image of an Indian shitting so hard that he launched himself into space. And various others as well. Why that photo is now gone, I don't know. It didn't want to show it to me? Okay, whatever. So yeah, they're out there, guys. Watch yourselves, or you will be feeling the wrath of the Indian. Was it the Indian Defense Force?
The
Indian
other
cyber
IDF.
defenders. Okay. Next up, let's see here. One moment. I remember seeing something earlier that I wanted to highlight, but maybe I lost it. Never mind. Okay, so we have covered, I can't remember if it was last year or early this year, but we have been doing sort of bi-weekly or whatever revisits to topics that are still sort of ongoing in Norway. And one of them we talked about youth crime at some point, which is inner city crime, mostly in Oslo, obviously, being the biggest city. And there were a lot of back and forth and public debating about whether or not the police are doing anything about this. And the police figured that, was the phrase, they're monitoring the situation, so they have everything under control. Well, it turns out that monitoring the situation wasn't enough, but thankfully they listened to that episode of Longhouse where we said that you're going to need boots on the ground police work. So the police have decided that they're taking action in Greenland, which is the an area in Oslo, and they will create a new department. The police management recognizes major challenges in Oslo, and from May, several tens of police officers will take part in a new venture in Greenland. Like it's this new wonderful thing called patrolling. Being on the beat, like Path. What a novel concept.
Modern problems require modern solutions.
Exactly. For a long time, the open drug environment has characterized and marred the heart of this old Oslo district. On Monday, VG, the paper, would tell reported on a previously unknown report that revealed criminals operate freely and seek out shop owners and employees through violence and threats. It is absolutely necessary to take long-term measures, said Assistant Unit Manager at the Center Unit, Joachim Dirdal. Today, we can report on how the police plan to fight open and organized crime in this area. On May 1st, the Oslo Police District will launch a new section, the Neighborhood Police Section. The department will consist of up to 38 police officers. Their mission is to crack down on open drug sales, violence, and threats in Greenland and Tøyen when it happens. There is a great need for this measure, stresses Police Chief Ida Melba Øystese. Therefore, these officers must be shielded to a greater extent from other tasks. So they're literally putting together a task force to get cops out on the street, which is great. I mean, it's a good thing. It's just I don't know. It feels a bit like they're patting themselves on the back for doing the obvious, but it's great.
Yeah, I'm happy
Uh,
to.
Yeah. We're probably more worried about Greenland than about Taiwan, but on Taiwan we're also worried that there are quite a lot of shadow numbers. I think that would be the like dark figures in terms of like underreporting, I think the word is. Last summer, the police carried out an extraordinary effort in Greenland and the Vaterland area. About 200 drug dealers were removed, and some of them had links to Swedish circles, according to the police chief. I think that's a bit of a euphemism, to be honest.
Yeah.
By the reporter here, and I think it's done on purpose. But the situation in Greenland was only temporary, and therefore the situation looks like this today. The criminal circles have taken over areas close to the city center, according to the police. 22% of the residents feel very or quite unsafe in their local environment, according to one of the police's surveys. In one area, there are dozens of kindergarten. In that one area, there are dozens of kindergartens and schools. We have reported about this as well on an earlier episode. We're perhaps a little surprised by how serious the conditions in Greenland actually were after talking to people, says the police chief to VG, by the way. That's a wild sentence to say to the news. Yeah, we knew it was bad. We didn't know it was that bad. Whew, sheesh, right?
I wouldn't have said anything. I just just keep monitoring.
Yeah. Let's see here. We have some stats. Never mind. This is long awaited. This is what Oslo's city council leader Erik Leigh Solberg told the paper. More tasks, increased crime, and general international unrest means that the Oslo police are now at a tipping point, Solberg believes. But he also points out that the investment should not come at the expense of safety in other districts. He stresses that the police lost 133 positions last year, meaning jobs. He refers to it as a completely unsustainable situation. I believe that the government now has to strengthen police's resources in Oslo. Because even though the new department is being created, it does not mean that the police will be staffed up. In fact, no new police officers are being hired in connection with this new initiative, says the police chief. Instead, the police has to regroup, and in other words, the new section will bring in officers from other departments in the police. Children are used to blue lights and violence. During a resident meeting here in Greenland, it was recently mentioned that children and young people no longer really react to blue light and violence. Blue light meaning the light on the ambulances or police cars.
Sirens.
Sirens, amber
yeah.
lights, whatever. Yeah. What do you think about that? It worries me deeply because that means that crime is becoming normalized, that violence is becoming normalized for these children. It is a terrible situation. No one should grow up in such an environment, and that's why I'm happy that the police will now have a significantly stronger presence in this area. The council leader was invited to the meeting organized by the Residents Association. A city council secretary at the City Council for Social Services attended the meeting also. How did you end up in a situation where children and young people are exposed to violence, used to violence, and all this happens within a radius of 400 to 500 meters from Oslo's largest police station? It is the country's largest police station, isn't it? So it's clear that this is very special to us. Police chief, they used to say, acknowledges and adds, it is not right for me to go backwards. Hang on. Okay, it's no right for me to look backwards. I have no knowledge of what has happened before. We have to look ahead, and it's clear that the children should not grow up in this way here. That is why the patrol car has to be parked, at least partly. I think she's implying that, police have to get out of the car and actually walk around. Yes, instead, the officers must tie their shoelaces, grab their feet, and grab their feet? Hang on. Grab their shoelaces, get on their feet, and spend time out on the street with people. In order to avoid ending up where Sweden is, it is important that we obtain as much overview and knowledge as we can, and that put in place targeted measures, she says. So it's a very overt allusion to Sweden there at the end. So this is overall, we said, I think it's a good thing. A bit, maybe a bit late, but it
I
is
will not.
also unfortunate
I will
that
not
they're sort
counter
of.
signal the regime on this. I'm in full agreement.
No, I think it's good. I think it's a good thing. I'll hope it works. I'll hope it does something good, and hopefully we'll see more of it in the future. That's all I can say on that. I was gonna say one more thing here. Yes, I did. If you just give me a moment here, I did look up because on stuff like this, there are um, never any comment sections anymore because if you go back like 5-10 years, every newspaper had a comment section, but that became, I think the phrase is, it became a breeding ground for right-wing extremism, which is pretty much just boomer right wingers, to be honest. But and it became a hassle to moderate, so most newspapers shut down their comment section. So if you want like to hear the voice of the people, you have to find other forums. So what I like to do whenever I find something like this is I put in like Reddit and then the title of the article, because there are a couple of Norwegian subreddits that usually sort of cross post these articles and have a comment section essentially on Reddit. And what I found was that a lot of people were sharing anecdotes about how it was living in the area, talking about like, yeah, my wife, got mugged like twice in the last 5 years, and one time, she was on her way to the dentist and she's clearly pregnant, and we had to move after that. A lot of these stories. So it certainly is very much due. Okay.
Oh yeah. I mean, Twitter is like that as well. I don't know if you can look up articles directly, but and somebody said that basically every comment that gets banned everywhere else ends up on Twitter these days. That's like been
Right.
Elon Musk's X. But yeah, the problem I think with the comment section is that the newspaper has to be responsible for the stuff that's there, and even if they're not legally responsible, then you still have that kind of sort of stinking comment section attached to the thing. And I mean, I'm not against freedom of expression or any of these things, but you know how these things get, right? It's just going to be like this kind of discontent boomers who are fed posting
Exactly, yeah.
especially with stuff like this, and like they can't restrain themselves.
No, they just get into like full boomer waffen mode, as it were. What I also found a lot of comments on were these kind of weird, like, oh yeah, I live in that area myself, and I've never, had any sort of anything serious happen. It's usually just like, whenever I walk outside, there are like junkies high on stuff or someone shooting something up, and I'm like, yeah, that's not supposed to be the norm. Right. So it's certainly, of course, something that is something needs to be done.
So I mean, yeah, the drug stuff is interesting. I think with some of the loosening of the laws of the Norwegian marijuana stuff, I've been getting ads on Twitter for marijuana. It's like this guy who's opening, I don't know if you call it a clinic or some kind of store in Oslo that's really in the gray area of what you can get away with.
It's still not really legal, is it?
No, they've tried to, as far as I understand, to sort of loosen the laws, especially around addicts, in how they're supposed to deal with people who are clear addicts, but it was not intended to be open up the doors for recreational use for youth, for example. But I've just been getting a lot of ads on Twitter from this one guy because it's not organic. It's not something I'm following or something, but it keeps showing up about I'm opening like this what do you call it, the coffee shop or something, and I haven't followed it that closely, but there is stuff happening with the with I guess some of the decriminalization laws, and we've also wanted to go back to the topic of cocaine, which seems to be quite big in Europe in general. So maybe that's going to be a stream in the future. We need to revisit the European cocaine problem.
Maybe. I think we touched on it at some point, but that was just like a local article about it sort of increasing. Okay, so we have our final thing, which is it's really going to be a lead in to maybe something that we can talk more about next week, because I would like to reach out to Leo Borealis and Burkhall and see if I can get them back on to talk a bit more about the right in Europe, and maybe we'll touch on some stuff with conscription, etc., etc. Things we've talked about before, but get a bit more in depth. So this is an article about how sort of the formal far right in Europe is divided over Putin. That we're going to have a look at. The EU's far right is deeply divided over Putin and recent scandals. You can just interrupt me whenever you want, Ludwig. This is reporting from Brussels. The next EU Parliament may be more pro-Russian and less green, but how much power could the far right get? The far right and the right-wing populists are likely to hold a snap election in June. Is that a correct? A great election in June. The new representatives to the EU Parliament will be when the new representatives to the EU Parliament will be elected. But the parties are divided on important issues. Close ties to Russian President Vladimir Putin are a sore point. So far, they have not been able to cooperate. Could that change after the election? And in that case, will it affect how much power they get over EU policy? First, a bit about who they are. A record number of Europeans say that they will vote according to surveys. Many show dissatisfaction with their own governments. It could give the parties on the far right a big boost. The right-wing populists and the far right belong to two different political groups in the EU Parliament. Identity and Democracy on the far right, where, for example, Marine Le Pen's party National Gathering, Geert Wilders' Party for Freedom, Alternative for Germany, and the Italian Liga are all members. There's also the nationalist and conservative European Conservatives and Reformists, which Italy's Brothers, the Polish Law and Justice Party, and the Spanish Vox are members. Together, they can capture 30% of the seats, up from 25% today. This shows in estimates from a German think tank, European Council on Foreign Relations. Parties that belong to these groups can become the largest in 9 of the EU's 27 member states. So I guess this is a projected change in representatives from the different countries, where France and Germany is going to get a big boost in representatives in either of these groups. Curiously, it's going down in Poland.
Interesting.
I thought Poland was getting based.
Well, I don't know what causes that, or how these numbers are, or if Poland was overrepresented previously, or how this. I don't know how they count this stuff. If it's like a population thing, or yeah, we'll have to look into it.
Yep. Let's see here. In some cases, the view of the ECR and the ID overlap. They both want stricter immigration policies, control of the borders, and to fight Islamist terror. At the same time, they're negative about parts of the EU's environmental and climate policies. Blah, blah, blah. For example, the project which will help the Union to reach its net zero emissions of greenhouse gases by 2050. They're also, to some extent, champions of strengthening traditional family values. 2019,
just a break in here. I mean, because this seems like, I don't know if like people are talking about black pills or white pills or whatever, but just as a statement of, as value-free fact as I can see, like generally in European countries, almost all over the place, the sentiment that immigration sucks and the kind of green reforms suck seems to be quite, popular almost across every country. There's very few exceptions where people are actually voting for more of either of these. I mean, you have some countries that have been, recently become quite rich because of the EU and so forth. Like, there's just a few exceptions, but generally, this is the thing that is going to be moving forward. And more of the like standard, far left stuff. It's just been. I mean, if you talk about numbers on how people feel, and in polling, it's just completely dead. It's just basically kind of the right wing and the center that exists now, at least electorally. I mean, I know people just want to purity spiral and say if like your party isn't like some sort of Evolian traditionalist perennial stuff, then it's not
And I
really
mean, and
right
that's
wing or
true
something.
and gay, but it's also the
I'm
world
just
we live in. So
yeah, I'm just saying that in terms of like if your main issues are less immigration and less of the climate reform stuff, and I guess more sort of they want more red meat in terms of conservative talking points. When they're talking about like traditional family values, that's what they mean. They mean that you're going to have your prime minister just going to come and talk about how great traditional families are. Something that's what it seems like to me. There's very few
it doesn't actually mean anything.
Politicians that can
Yeah.
actually do something that is going to actually strengthen
They're
families.
not going to actually implement policy that will change the culture and the makeup
They
of
could, but
society.
it's often quite difficult.
Yeah, I'm just saying
I mean,
that's what you're saying.
the birth rate issue is.
Exactly,
I mean,
yeah.
it's on the front of I think of everyone's agenda, no matter where you are in politics, and it's a problem for every country in Europe. Some more than others, of course, but it's something
Yeah, and
that
you can
ideally
workshop
you'd
that
want.
yourself. I mean, if you want like a fun time, imagine that you were some leader for a quote unquote far right. Like, let's say, what is Gert Wilder's party name again? I don't remember.
Justice
You get
something.
elected. You have pretty much like, let's say you have the majority. You can pretty much do whatever you want. How are you going to policy increased birth rates and make sure they stay that way? Because you quickly, with the understanding that just giving people money to have babies doesn't seem to work, right?
Well,
Because quickly you're looking at making so drastic changes to sort of the groundwork of modern society that you're getting into basically the whole Trumpton thing that academic agent was going on Twitter, where he ended up basically abandoning the idea on the grounds that people don't want to give up their phones, right? The shakeup that's going to be required for people to accept or to reach better birth rates is going to be so big that no one's going to actually be willing to accept it.
Well, I've made some posts on Twitter about this, right? And sort of just my conclusions based on we've done streams talking about this. I read articles on this, like we've talked about the situation in Japan and South Korea. And my conclusion is that really sort of conservatism or family values is not going to do shit for birth rates. Not only it's not going to do shit, I think conservatism can actually be quite counterproductive. And this is like one of these. You have that meme with the guy from Entangled who has like all the knives pointed at him or whatever, and there's like this, what's your opinion? Where everybody's pointing the knife at you, but like it's just my conclusion looking at the evidence is that trying to force on some kind of like, okay, we're going to have more conservative family values, it will not do anything to increase birth rates. When you look at, say, countries like South Korea, for example, or like Japan, that are like I think the most naturally conservative populations probably on the planet, I would say. That would not be a stretch. And like their conservatism is not only is it not helping them increase the birth rates, it actually seems to be stopping them from increasing the birth rates in many cases, with the amount of kind of like red tape that gets in the way before two people can move in together and start having children.
Yeah. Nordanon says, increase the socioeconomic status of young men and decrease the socioeconomic status of women relative to that of men. Yes, but now do it with the caveat that you cannot actually take away any gifts, because once you do, you lose your democratic mandate. So now you have to either change the playing field, right, by doing a revolution or a coup or something like that, or there's going to have to be some sort of outside event that basically changes the whole economic structure.
Well, I mean, part of the idea, like if you look at the countries in Europe, I think France has the highest.
You can enact the Canada-made thing and have like a day off the pillow.
Well,
right?
yeah, that's another way to deal with the population pyramid. But I mean, France, I think, is the country in Europe with not replacement birth rates, but closest to replacement birth rates. And I mean, I shared some stats on Twitter for this, where I know you don't get direct ethnic data, but like what you get from some of the like nationalist crowd is that the only reason that they have that is that they have so many brown people, and that the brown people are they're filling in the birth rates for the whites or whatever, and that's why it looks so good. But there are stats to show that actually even like women with two French born grandparents have more kids in France. And I think just generally the idea about the shorter work days and just generally, okay, if you have more space and more time,
You will have
to
more
have
babies.
sex,
Yeah.
then you can have more kids. I think that's kind of the French solution to this, is that the countries who have actually more space and more time to actually do the thing you need to do to physically create these babies are going to have more of them, instead of
I'm
just
sure there's some kind of like, psychological or whatever effect to that too. Like when you cram a person into a box, in a sense, both physically and mentally, in the modern world, you basically just decrease their sex drive.
Well, if there is any like I mean, if people live in these kind of bugman boxes in metropolitan areas that are tight on space and they live on top of each other, and it's a workaholic culture that everything is about just working overtime constantly. You don't have time. It really, and you can add conservatism on top of that. It doesn't help because there's just no time to do it. So you have to actually free up some time for people to focus on family instead of just focusing on careers or whatever status that you get from money. And that's it's kind of the conclusion that I've come to, is that unless you're able to do that on some sense, then you can sit and talk as much as you want about family values or something. It's just not going to do very much. But we're getting way off topic here. I think just in the interest of time, we should
comment here from Les Grossman. He says, Ludicpath, your Twitter is like a mental floss for me.
I don't even know what
that's
that means. Like,
I think it's a compliment.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Where was I? Yes, they're also to some extent champions of strengthening traditional family values. Again, as we just said, without really knowing what that means, it seems. In 2019, the idea of gathering all the right-wing populist parties in one powerful alliance in the European Parliament was launched. And the project is dead, says Eric Maurice. He's an analyst at the think tank European Policy Center in Belgium. Because the differences are in line. The differences are lining up and the rivalry is becoming greater. Putin is splitting the opinions. It is especially foreign policy and the attitude towards the EU that divides them, according to Nikolai von Ondarsa. He's a researcher at the German think tank Institute for International and Security Policy. A lot of think tanks here. ECR is for NATO membership and cooperation with the US. They're skeptical about more cooperation with the EU. That's an interesting position. In ID, some of the parties are against NATO membership, and some want to leave the EU or destroy the EU from within. So yeah, you can clearly see that this is a bit of a difficult gap to bridge. Relations with Russia are also a hot topic. Among ECR's members, the opposition to Russia is strong. For ID's members, the tone is quite different. I believe that these parties are dangerous because they're either friendly towards Russia or spoken openly about the fact that support for Ukraine should be stopped, says Pavel Surka, is a political scientist at ECFR. So their opinions mirror the ones of the Red Youth, I guess. Or not even the Red Youth, just the Reds.
Well, yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's a standard. It's the kind of standard views there. I know that ADF has a lot of both Eurosceptics and Russia connections. So, I mean, we could probably have an episode where we get into the weeds of like what parties are on what side of that conflict.
Yeah. See here. Fubar201 says, I always reflexively attack the attempts to get a shorter work week. I need to rethink my position there. I've found within myself that a lot of without sort of getting into like Marxist territory, right? Because you can you can't do that without sounding like a Marxist. A lot of the assumptions that I think a lot of people on the right have about work is very sort of like boomerish, very Dave Ramsey coded. And not very, I guess the word is, I don't want to use the word aristocratic because that's not the correct word. It becomes too specific because there's certainly something in the value of work, right? And being self-sufficient to a certain extent, or being able to share the value of your work with a local community. But I don't think that's the case in a lot of modern work life, and having some sort of international company ultimately just drain you of all of your potential is I mean, don't give them any more than you have to, right?
Yeah, I mean, BAP made this post about work culture and what exactly like the American GOP could do if they want youth votes. The suggestion was basically that cut unpaid internships, for example, that should just become illegal, or these kind of fake job ads should become illegal. Unpaid overtime should become just these would be like simple adjustments that you have to just destroy this kind of like work cult behavior. And it's not just about socialism, but there's all this kind of selective libertarianism bullshit that is going on with this kind of like work stuff where you have to, what do you call it, like the cult of LinkedIn or something, that this stuff should just be destroyed by legislation. It's not
LinkedIn should just be destroyed. It should just be banned.
Just gay.
You can even just pitch it as like a green policy. Like just get data on how much energy is spent on like LinkedIn servers and pass it as like a green policy.
Yeah, so. LinkedIn banned, #1 priority.
I believe, yes, a political scientist at ECFR, Italy's Deputy Prime Minister Matteo Salvini has appeared several times in a t-shirt with a picture of Vladimir Putin. Since 2017, his party Lega has had an agreement with Putin's party. It was recently terminated. 2 of AfD's members of parliament must respond to allegations that they have received money to advocate for Putin, says Reuters. Marine Le Pen's party created election campaign material with pictures of her and Putin. And while ECR has a common program and often agrees on issues, the story is quite different for ID. In around half of all cases, they do not agree, according to Ondarza, nor do they have a common program. It is also personal and ideological feuds in the ID. Let's remember, these are the sort of more hardcore parties. Earlier this year, there was a leak that shocked many. Politicians from the far-right party Alternative for Deutschland had taken part in a secret meeting. A plan to deport people who are not ethnically German was discussed. The leak caused Le Pen to distance herself from the party leader Alice Weidel and the AfD. She has long wanted to make her party national gathering appear less radical in order to capture more voters. Not sure what to think about that, but I think we all knew where Le Pen stood already.
I think basically I posted a picture of Marie Le Pen like with sort of this African hat and all these Africans in the background. I think like French people in general are quite right-wing, just naturally. It's this kind of misconception that I've gotten through popular media that like they say like the French are pussies, so they just give up on everything, and that they're soft, and it's like the opposite is true. They're very kind of naturally staunch right-wing on many issues. And I mean, let's say like if Macron adapts some of the talking points about, say, like restricted immigration or maybe easing on this kind of environmental stuff, then there's no use for Le Pen at all. The only thing she's talking about now is that she wants to like protest the increased retirement age in France, right? Because they had the retirement age of 62, I think, and then Macron raised it to 64, and there was protests. So it's like, if Macron takes some of these right-wing things, then the only thing Le Pen has to go on is like these kind of gay, the boomers should have more money type issues or something. I just don't care about those types of populist issues at all, really. So at least for France, I'm just not that interested in her. In that right. Opposition party. I mean, there are many countries in Europe that were basically like the sort of the centrists have taken in enough feedback in terms of like, okay, this is not popular to the point where they to me at least look more desirable than some of the fringe parties, and that just might be sounding weird for having this.
They sort of take the morsels they can stomach, right? And then what you're left with is, I am also critical of immigration, but look at this weirdo. And then they point to whoever's far right. And usually they are a bit of a weirdo, right? Just by the nature of politics,
they are generally more dysfunctional. Let's say, I mean, we talked about the Norwegian Democrats for a while. And I've been following more Norwegian accounts on Twitter to try to get a little bit of a pulse of what's going on there. I mean, they're also really sucked up in this kind of America brain culture war stuff. I find like
it just becomes containment all around. Like everyone's being contained, and everyone's containing themselves.
But
It's really annoying.
yeah, like I told you, I find accounts that are called like Norway First, and the only thing they do is repost libs of TikTok and this kind of like transgenders from America and stuff. It's such absolute nonsense. But I mean, I look at parties like, say, the Norway Democrats, for instance, and like their foreign policy position is basically they're pro-Russia and pro-Israel. It's like the worst fucking combination you could get. I didn't even know that, right? But this is like, okay, because I agree with their position on transgenderism or something, like they're more anti-trans, more anti-LGBTQ, but on foreign policy, I'm just so not interested. And if you look at
that's why I'm pro-Israel, is because they're more anti-trans than my government.
Yeah, no, I mean
Palestinians, they're very into the trans stuff, right? So I can't be for them.
Well, I don't know. It becomes a contrarian thing in Norway because the mainstream position is kind of a pro-Palestinian position.
It does,
but like, okay, you look at the other.
Also, you have to remember that a lot of Norwegian right wing does have overlap with some strands of Christian conservatism, which literally believe that Jews hailed the second coming of Christ or something like that.
Well,
like Israel is like part of some grand prophecy.
That's the other big party on the fringe right in Norway, like the conservative or like the Christian party, right? And like the head of that party, he's literally Israel's strongest soldier. Like he spent most of his life in Africa trying to proselytize about Israel to African.
Yeah, you sent
leaders,
me a podcast
right?
interview with him, and like 5 minutes in, they talk about how he made like the top 10, and I'm not using this word like even derogatory. I have to watch myself because we're on probation. He made the top 10 goy list for like 2020 or something.
Oh yeah, he has like won prizes right in Israel for being the best proselytizer for Israel. He sounds like he wants to be the prime minister of Israel more than anything. And I don't know like his other positions, but just that's what you're seeing there. It's them. It's like two staunchly pro-Israeli parties, and then like a libertarian party that's sort of on the fringes, and then one slightly environmentally skeptic one, and they're all in complete. They're sort of very disorganized. At least it's gotten better, but you're seeing the amount of kind of like infighting they're doing and disarray. And I'm just looking at some of these centrist parties who take a different line and just come across as more competent. And there's just nothing on the fringes that is interesting for me. It's like, okay,
we have to build it ourselves.
I have to deal with the kind of like the tranny stuff maybe for another 10 years, but it's some of that, at least the most extreme tranny stuff, seems to be blowing over.
That's the option that you have to like just bite the bullet.
It's pretty awful, but
enough ground to make any meaningful change. Kind of sucks.
Yeah, no, I agree, but let's keep reading so we get through it.
A cheerful end. Yeah. Competition between ID and ECR's parties at a national level is also strong. In France, Le Pen has distanced herself from the far more radical and Islamophobic Eric Zemmour. Will they be able to cooperate? Zerka will not rule out that the party's groups may gain more power in parliament. It will be more conservative anyway. If there is an opportunity for them to become important in the next 5 years, they may become more willing to cooperate than people think. What will it take for them to be able to get together? When they have to ignore enormous differences in politics, but also strong national contradictions. That doesn't seem quite likely now, says von Ondarza. The big question is whether the EU's largest party group, the centre-right EPP, will be open to cooperating with the ECR or ID in individual cases. If they open up for it, the centre-right and even the far-right will have a majority for the very first time, and then the party groups on the right can be decisive in individual cases. And this is how they can influence policy. This could mean that more skepticism about expanding the EU and even stricter immigration policy, Zerka believes. He also believes that there may be less ambitious climate and environmental policy. Many Europeans believe that the EU's climate policy has gone too far. They fear that they will no longer be allowed to drive their cars, and farmers fear that stricter measures will take away their livelihood. According to Zerka, and he adds, it's an important driving force behind the right-wing wave. Parliament has been an important champion of the rule of law and the protection of human rights. Maybe less focus on that, predicts von Ondarza. May become more difficult to lay the leadership cabal in the EU, says Maurice. For example, Ursula von der Leyen has had problems being re-elected as head of the European Commission. That's the end of the article. So, I mean, it's a blue wave, but is anything going to come of it? I guess is the it's the article.
Well, I think I think just for the EU to survive the way that it is, because it's been quite unpopular. I think both because of these economic problems, like say, with the economic redistribution, that a lot of countries feel like they're just being drained, being in the EU, and they have to pay for other economies. So I know that like Maloney has actually tried to focus on this and making the EU more of a geopolitical unit and less of an economic unit, and I think that would actually be better in the future. It's more of a geopolitical, security-oriented union that could help Europe, carry a little bit more weight geopolitically than only say relying on the United States, and having just less focus on the economic stuff and just letting the countries decide more in terms of immigration policy and these other things. At least for me, that would be a favorable outcome, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. All right. Well, here. Yes, that's everything we have for this week. Of course, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you everyone for listening. As I said, I'll try to get something together for next week in terms of going a bit further into this, the sort of potential and future of the EU, maybe some conscription stuff, etc., etc. I have slotted the 9th of May, which should be 2 weeks from now, for Nomad to come back to us and talk about I think he wanted to talk about cultural differences between the Far East and the West. We did sort of touch a bit on it on our Korea stream, but it would be interesting to get into a bit more of the differences broadly on Korea, Japan, China with the West. So he usually brings good stuff and deep conversations, which is great. And I think that's all we have that I can reveal for now. Remember to like, comment, boost us in the algorithm if you want. Luddic Path, anything you want to chill?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter for more mental floss, I guess, and read praxarchy.com.
Follow Luddic Path on Twitter for more mental floss and deep cleaning of your mind. And you can follow me for shit posts. That's pretty much, unfortunately, all I do these days. Sometimes I chime in. Today, I actually learned something. I learned that Americans have a drive-through bank. I was scrolling Twitter, and Charlemagne was tweeting about how he was sitting in the queue at the drive-through bank, and that broke my European mind. I couldn't comprehend it. Yeah.
So they don't have digital banks, but they have like drive-through.
Apparently, yeah.
Okay. I need to look into this.
Post shower thoughts or memes that are funny that usually follow some semblance of a point, I guess. All right. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Thank you for listening. And we'll see you guys next week, and have a great weekend.